first find out whether or not you can all hear me all right. Is this all right? You can hear way back in the back there? Okay, great. Well, again, hi to all of you pachyderms and all you hill climbers and those who love a pachyderm or a hill climber. And my name is Dave McBride, and I'll explain why I am presiding over this here event in a minute. But first, we will get things going this morning by taking just a brief moment to recognize a special VIP. A special VIP that is present. The friends of Michelle Carroll call her Dalk. Her genealogy places her firmly in the hill climber bloodline. Her name is stenciled on the M35A2 deuce and a half just outside, and she has logged many parade miles driving that vehicle. And that's old news to many people who are here today, but what you may not know is that Dalk is the only female ever to be inducted into the Central Florida Sports Hall of Fame. She was an all-star softball player starting in elementary school, and she continued into league play, where she continues to excel at her passion playing across leagues from men's to co-ed to women's. So a tip of the hat, everybody, to Michelle Carroll, who knocks it out of the park on the field and as a key crew member of Project 425. And so let's acknowledge her. We move on to how come I was honored with the job here of presiding over this gathering today and moving things along here this morning. I was here 10 years ago. As the MC to help introduce the 425 right outside at its coming out party. I was a local broadcaster on the radio at the time here in West Palm Beach, and Mike Carroll heard me on the radio, and I guess he liked what I was doing because he showed up at the radio station and brought me donuts. And that's how I met this interesting guy, and how I became the honorary PIO for Project 425, the Huey Project. The project that began when Mike got the number of a fine-looking old girl, and that number was 68-16425. Project 425 was born. 10 years later, the Project 425 guys who did the real work of restoring the helicopter and who are tireless in taking it to events hereabouts locally as an educational tool are pretty well known in these parts. As they come into view at a St. Patrick's or a Christmas parade all around the area, you'll hear people turn to somebody else and say, "Hey, it's those helicopter guys from the fair." And they've been telling the story of the Vietnam War to anybody who will listen a decade longer than Ken Burns on PBS. By the way, one of the statistics cited in that documentary, you may have seen it, that jumped out at me when I heard it, was right after the pronouncement that Vietnam was America's first helicopter war. The incredible stat was that over the course of the war, helicopters in Vietnam flew 36 million sorties. That is a staggering number. All I know about military helicopters, I learned from Mike Carroll. He explained that even though he used his time and talents to restore the Huey, it was the Chinook that occupied his full-time attention in Vietnam. The, at the time, medium weightlifter that's been described as the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile wearing propeller beanies on both ends, only way more menacing. The helicopter that flies in formation with itself. He showed me the old Gesundheit. He showed me the old photos in the albums that you can see here at the ranch with images of guys who are just like everybody in this room more than 2/3 of their lives ago. You pachyderms and hill climbers carried in the heavy weapons and the ammunition and carried out the downed aircraft and the wounded. You mechanics were tireless in keeping them flying in often perilous conditions. There are Americans alive today because of you, and some who died in Southeast Asia lie today under the grass of home because of you. If the UH-1 gunship was the light utility truck of combat aircraft, the Chinook was the flying tractor-trailer rig that could lift 4 tons. And speaking of trucks, Mike and his crew didn't stop with the 425. As you can see here at the ranch, as you have seen, they collected some traveling companions for her, other military service vehicles. It's a wonder to witness the convoy that travels with the trailered Huey around to events locally as the procession and the crewmen in camo pass through residential neighborhoods on their way to something. Residents might be excused if they run to turn on CNN to discover what's up. When the 425 was carried here to Mike Carroll's operating room, where she underwent 2 years of structural and cosmetic surgery, like the Tin Woodsman, it was also given a heart. And that heart is the crew that Mike assembled to restore her and to travel with her to tell her story and yours repeatedly over the last 10 years in countless public venues. And it is accurate to say that over that time, the numbers of photos of vets from multiple wars and casual admirers and young people and looky-loos who have posted photos on Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram of themselves helmeted and seated behind the M60D in the open door of the Huey have grown to number in the hundreds of thousands. Mike and Doc Ginny and the rest of the Project 425 contributors feel honored that you have traveled here to fellowship with us today. And now let us pause and stand for the playing of our national. Oh, and by the way, it was suggested to me to relay to anyone with the notion to take a knee that they should see Major Bob Machen for an ass chewing. That is what I was instructed to say. Let's say you can report to him right by the windmill outside. Now, please stand for our national anthem. Everyone can be seated, at ease. Now, before we proceed with more speakers and presentations, I think it's appropriate to hear an opening prayer and some thoughts by the Reverend John Glenn. John served as a casualty evacuation dust-off medic in the U.S. Army starting in 1970. For the last 45 years, he's been a pastor and a teacher, and in 2001 founded Alpha Ministries at Freedom Ranch in Okeechobee, where he lives with his wife, Sandy. Reverend Glenn.
It's indeed a privilege for me to join you, brethren. And I do call you brothers. Not just because of the experience we had in Vietnam, or anybody who sheds blood with us as brothers. But I also am privileged and honored to be here in the presence of Project 425. For my own personal recovery, Project 425 played an extremely important role. I, like so many other veterans returning home, didn't have a warm welcome, as you might imagine. As a matter of fact, I found it prudent keep my mouth shut about where I've been, what I've done. I found it more advisable to deny the fact that I had served in Vietnam, and I did so for 40 years, trying as best I could to go on with life. About 5 or 6 years ago, some of the symptomatology is PTSD, as many of you might be aware of personally, began to manifest itself to a point that it concerned me, and I sought help from the Vet Centers of America, and through them, the VA. But it wasn't until one day going to the fair, South Florida Fair, I noticed this helicopter sitting down there at the end of the runway, and I wondered, what in the world's going on with that? So I kind of sneaked around. I didn't want to just approach it right up front. I just kind of sneaked around a little bit. My wife and grandkids and so on had gone on to look at other things, but I couldn't get away from it. I kept looking and looking, and finally got close enough where I think it was General Jackson along with you, Mike, standing there, and maybe Bill, you guys. And I kind of eased up and looked at it. And I was brave enough to actually reach out and touch it. And that marked a significant change in my attitude. It unleashed a lot of memories, many of them good, but some of them are horrific. And I walked around, I remember the way it was seated, it's kind of like it is out there now. But they had both doors open. And I walked around to the left side of the aircraft. That was my spot, sitting on an armored plate behind the pilot, or the aircraft commander, in the left seat. And I had this overwhelming urge to climb up and sit there. I didn't do it at the time, but I felt that would be the only place I would be home and be safe. I can't begin to express my gratitude and my thanks for these brothers who have engaged in this labor of love to restore the helicopter, the Huey. That was, as has been noted and said many times, the symbol of our war. The whop, whop, whop of those blades will never be forgotten by anyone. And by the way, the whop, whop, whop of those shit hooks were even more impressive. I'm sorry for the language, but that's what we called them. They came and retrieved our choppers when they went down. And some of the most glorious pictures I have in my mind is a dust-off helicopter hanging from a Huey, going back to be repaired, knowing that the crew also got out. I could go on and on about memories, as I'm sure all of you can. But anybody that's experienced combat in any form understand an answer to the question that plagued me for years. And that was, where was God in Vietnam? Where was it? Amidst all the horror and the chaos, the corruption, the violence, where was God in that picture? You know, it took me a long time to come to grips with that. Years, as a matter of fact. I had been pastoring a church for a while. I'd probably been in the ministry 25, 30 years. And a Christian school in Jupiter asked me to come and speak on Veterans Day. That was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. but I hadn't even begun my journey back home. And it hit me. The only thing I could share with them at the time. But where was God in Vietnam? And I finally put together, as the Apostle John defines him in his first general letter, God is love. And what I saw exhibited among the horrors, exhibited plainly among the death, was the love between the brothers who were there supporting each other. You see, we didn't fight for ideology. We didn't risk our lives for political reasons. We did so for one reason and one reason only. That was because we love those brethren on the ground. That's why we went. That's why we risked our lives. That's why we did the job we did. Because of the love for one another. And it finally dawned on me. That's where God was. He was right slap dab in the middle of all that chaos. And the love that continues today in the camaraderie in an organization and an assembly such as this here today. So I'd ask you to join me in prayer as we open with the invocation. Father, we thank you for the privilege we have to gather here together among so many brethren that at one time were willing to lay down their lives for one another and still are. We thank you for that love that emanates from you and radiates through us in our service one to another. I thank you for the continuation of that love even now at the end of our days. And I ask you to be honored and glorified in everything that's done and said here today. Which in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Glenn. Some multimedia now with a segment produced by the National Geographic called Christmas Bombing. This segment includes the release from the Hanoi Hilton of POW Bill Arcuri, who is among those Project 425 contributors present here today. He's the guy with the remote control right there. Bill is a West Point Army grad, and he transferred into the Air Force B-52 program. His aircraft was shot down by surface-to-air missiles while on a bombing mission over North Vietnam. Now the video.
So-called Christmas bombing campaign. Looking to force the North back to the negotiating table, Nixon targeted high bombing was covered, and the cover resumed.
And so, certainly, there's nobody that I'd rather ask to do this next task than Bill Arcuri. Naturally, I would ask him now to come forward and recite for all of us the POW Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, I'm going to recite the POW Pledge of Allegiance. You can stay seated. This was put together by the American ex-prisoners of war. I pledge allegiance to the flag. I am an American. I was a prisoner of war. I have served my country. I need no one to tell me what allegiance I owe to my flag, to my country, to my home. Of the United States of America. This is my country. I have fought for it. I have been in prison for it, and part of me has died for it. And to the republic for which it stands. This flag stands for me, for love of my country, my love for my family, my love for my friends. I did not forsake it when I was starved, when I was beaten, when I was killed. One nation, under God, indivisible. I am one man. I have one country, America. I worship one God. Under God I was captured. Under God I was saved. Under God I have no fear. With liberty and justice for all. My allegiance is to liberty, to justice. My flag represents the best of myself, my effort. My home, my country. I will pledge allegiance to the flag. I will pledge under the love of God. It is my right, my privilege, my duty. I have earned it. Tell me not how. I have given you much. I am an ex-prisoner of war. Take nothing more from me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of my country.
Thanks very much, Bill. We hope you've all felt welcomed here at the G&M Ranch today, but you're really not welcomed until you've been officially welcomed. And here to accomplish that mission is Ron Carroll. In 1968, he joined the Marine Corps and served in Vietnam. For 3 decades after his service, he worked for Palm Beach County Fire Rescue. And today, Ron is the Vice Mayor of Loxahatchee Groves, where he has lived for more than 56 years. You're up, Ron.
I don't know what to say now. He said what I was going to say, but I want to thank each and every one of you veterans from the bottom of my heart for serving your country and serving your family. And I want you to keep in mind, with every veteran, hopefully you've had a woman stand beside you through it all, and that's your wife. So I'm no more prouder of anybody than my wife, but I'm very proud of my country. It bothers me that some of the things that's going on now with the football players who make millions and millions don't have enough respect for our flag and the people that have served it, especially the ones that aren't able to be here right now. So thank you all for coming, but most of all, thank you for serving your country and giving your all. I am the Vice Mayor of the town. I felt like after retiring from the fire service, I wanted to put something back into this town. I'm very proud of Loxahatchee Groves. I'm very proud of Mike and his crew. A lot of people are working with him, and the 425, he goes all over the place. But he lets people know what Vietnam was about, and I personally think that Vietnam veterans and stuff have done their very best to try and make it easier for the new veterans, Desert Storm, whatever it might be. I think we kind of took a beating by the public and by America. Not our families, not our wives, not our friends, but it was a war that we took the beating from. But through that, we've tried to help all the new veterans and stuff. Do we have any World War II veterans in here, by chance? All right. Hey, no. World War II veterans and World War I, they're scarce. When I see one, whether it be in a restaurant or whether I see him walking down the street with a walker and a wheelchair, I go out of my way to thank him for what he did. But I do welcome you to this town. I apologize for the road condition. I fight hard to keep that from happening, but I haven't had much luck lately. But like I said, this is a beautiful place Mike has got out here. And when people can come here and visit, it does wonders for them, especially the vets. So while you're here, enjoy yourself. And also, I want to say something about Pastor John Glenn. Freedom Ranch in Okeechobee, Florida. Have any of you in here been out there for one of his occasions for the vets? If you haven't and you can ever make it, try and make it. But I was out there last year, and he does an outstanding thing for all the vets and stuff. So I want to thank him for always being here to say the prayer and stuff, and all that. But have a nice time while you're here, and thank you so much for spending a little bit of time in Loxahatchee Groves.
Thank you, Ron, and as a civilian, let me take this opportunity to thank you for your service. Of course, the primary reason for the gathering here today at this location is because of the extraordinary work that's been done here in rehabilitating and restoring a combat aircraft that Mike considered a forgotten comrade in arms worth the time and expense to save it. I'll ask that Mike and Air Force Bill now step up to reflect on, first, 3 fallen and valuable supporters of Project 425, and then speak to the 425 history with the help of a brief video.
Okay, we have 3 very, very loyal contributors to Project 425, and it was Rocky Myshak and Chuck Controne and George Miller. This is an interview, my last interview with Chuck here.
This is Chuck, from July 11th, 2015. Chuck and I are just about ready to drool over some of these beautiful cars here. Chuck, what about that giant that you used to run there?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about it.
It was 6290, started off 3, transit, natural record holders, 1970, 2 days before I went to the Army, sent all that to a natural record.
All right, I didn't know that was going to be the last time I got to talk to Chuck Controne, but I felt obligated to share that with you, my last few minutes with him. That was when we're at out there in South Dakota and Rapid City, you know. I went up to Chuck's funeral, and it was awesome. I was right up front on the microphone. I testified exactly what Chuck had done for 425. I thanked him for his Vietnam service. And Chuck was a greeter at this church. It was built in the 1860s, right in the middle of town, Painesville, Ohio. Chuck was loved up there like I would never believe. I had a standing ovation coming off that altar, and every one of those parishioners, over 200 of them, gave me a personal greeting. It took 3 or 4 hours to get myself together during the wake ceremony and all, but Chuck was a very special, special guy. And I really miss him. Rocky Myshak. Rocky and I grew up in Bay City, Michigan. We were high school rivals. I was St. James Fighting Irish, and he was a St. Stanislaus Polish. And we've had some fantastic games together. He was the quarterback, and I was defensive tackle, and I've done nothing but love to grab a hold of him and throw him down and rub his face in dirt. Same way on the basketball court. All through our grade school and high school, we were competitive all the way. Well, over Vietnam, I was there for about 2 or 3 months, and walking back from the mess hall one afternoon on the Ptsd, in our little screened-in hooches, I hear "Yakshimash," and I take a look around, and there was that great big fat Polak, old Myshak, standing 5 feet. I said, is that you, Rocky? He goes, "Stat me." So Rocky and I not only served sports together, we served Vietnam together and did have a day of flight or two every once in a while. Again, I went up to that funeral, and I was at the family's table throughout all the service, and I've never seen such a wonderful ceremony. I miss Rocky. George Miller. We all know George. George is one of my most favorite pilots to fly with because he paid attention to me. He was an officer. I was enlisted. I loved what I was doing in Vietnam and was excited to go home as well. But when the Hillclimbers started forming their reunions, and I was contacted by Rocky Myshak and eventually Rodney Brown, I was very surprised to be reunited with George again. And I was really shocked at our last reunion. I asked Mr. Cox, hey, where's George at? He says, he's down the road at the hospital on life support. Really? I said, can you take visitors? He says, yeah, but be aware when you get there. I finally found him in this great big hospital, and there he was, tubes, machines, not the George I knew. I walked over to him, and he opened his eyes, and shut his eyes again, opened them again, and I looked at his bed, and at the head of the bed was his rosary. He's a devout, practicing Catholic. I said, Mr. Miller, you won't believe this, but I'm an altar server, Catholic, and I'm also a Eucharistic minister. I wish I had communion for you. He blinked his eyes. I just couldn't bring myself to seeing what I saw, and he died there a month or two later. Anyway, my best memory of George was at a hill climber reunion, and we passed a hat for 425. That wasn't good enough for Mr. Miller. He stood up in the big crowd at the farewell banquet, reached down, unbuckled his belt, brought that belt over his head. He says, I've been wearing this belt for over 30 years. It was a Chinook. A Chinook on the belt buckle. He says, I want to auction this off and give the proceeds to 425. He's holding out of his pants, holding the belt up. Right here 10, right here 20. I forget what the final was. It was well over $100. But that was George Miller. That was George Miller. Well, previously, before that, I talked to George quite frequently on the phone, telling him all my woes. I can't find parts. I can't do this and that. Well, what do you need? What do you need? I said, the main thing I need right now is a rotor head. That thing seems to be the most impossible thing to get. Within 3 weeks, he says, Mike, send somebody up here to pick it up. I says, oh, really? How much? He says, don't worry about the cost. It's going out the back door. I said, okay. Well, I mean, these guys are gone. We're here. Let's just take a minute and reflect on these 3 guys. And let's take a look around at ourselves and make sure we keep ourselves in good shape. Chuck Controne was in perfect shape. An infection got a hold of him. You know? I don't know what it is. Okay, Bill. Yes, Bob. Watch your step. We're going on an accident here. I know you're brief. I really do.
Stay here with me, buddy. About how many years ago, Mike?
10?
10? About 10 years ago. About 10 years ago, Mike came up to see me at Port St. Lucie. I'd seen a guy pulling a helicopter around. He'd go to a few places locally, Boy Scout meetings and such. So when they got there, I said, hey, let's go over and look at that helicopter on the trailer. So we went over to look at it, and he had an idea. And you're all standing here close to 425, because he started with an idea in Port St. Lucie after we had our conversation. And that's how it got started. And all these reunions since then, and what you see today is a small idea and a good, hard worker that sticks to the job. Rocky was in our flight group for almost a year. And like he said one day, we had a float aircraft because I knew a general that gave us a C-47. And he says, After that, nature would come out, give us this priorities for the day, and then he had all day to get our ass in trouble because we had all the catch-all missions that were there. But every time I think of that crew and think of 425 and Mike, it gives me heart to what they sacrificed for. These young guys, they're all about 17, 18, but they carried their load, and it was a tremendous load. And it wasn't all fun and games. It was life and death. And it just breaks my heart to see that people disgrace all of you by this fiasco going on in the NFL. And I just thank you for being here and giving honor to Mike and his project. And if you would, stand up and applaud him right here so everybody will know it's his idea.
We're going to see if we can round up. Yes, sir. Come on up here to the microphone.
I want to address the POW.
Stop.
Alliance.
Wait till you get here. Okay.
I want to address
What's your name again?
Jim Lamb-Sargus from the 200th Aviation, and I want to address the letter of the POW Alliance. What I think should happen is that letter needs to go to the VFW, to the American Legion, to your congressman, and to the Veterans Association, and then I think it ought to be presented and read at each event. And then I think that anyone who would take a knee to that should be disciplined. And that's my thoughts and my theory. I appreciate that.
Do that, okay? All right, and now for something completely different. Everybody here probably knows about the famous Quasimodo. Quasi's going to come up. I thought that Quasi would be being paraded through right about now, but he's a little reluctant to appear on cue, and so he'll be here in just a moment. But Quasimodo, in case you don't know, gained international acclaim as the ugliest dog on the planet. And he is, Quasimodo, quite likely, the most universally recognized, thank you. She is the most universally recognized resident in this here part of the state, I think. And all of you may not have seen, though, the national TV appearance of Quasimodo. So here, in anticipation of Quasimodo making a personal appearance, just for y'all, you can take selfies later, is the Jimmy Kimmel Quasimodo makeover.
First, we paid tribute to man's best friend. The world's ugliest dog was crowned in Petaluma, California over the weekend. They do this every year, and taking the top honor this year was a 10-year-old pit bull Dutch Shepherd mix named Quasimodo.
The newly crowned world's ugliest dog took a victory lap around New York City. Quasimodo, named after the hunchback of Notre Dame, won the title Friday, as she may look different. Her owner says she's just like any other dog.
Except she's only half a dog. Yes, Quasimodo is a girl, is missing a couple of vertebrae, but other than that, she's perfectly healthy and happy. And her owners are here in the audience. Virginia and Mike, hello, guys. Well, thank you for coming all the way out here. And has she always been ugly, or did this develop over time?
She was born that way.
Born that way. That's how you found her?
That's how I found her.
Do you have other ugly animals at home?
Yes.
You do? What do you have?
Two dogs, a cat, an armadillo, a pig, a rooster, some tortoises, a horse.
You're running a Petco then, huh? All right, so we want to do something special for Quasimodo.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Doc Ginny in the company of her very special friend, Quasimodo.
Oh, knows that guy. Where's my treats?
By the way, Quasi recently, believe it or not, sat for a session with a sculptor, and a bronze statue of Quasimodo is now being crafted to be unveiled in coming months. So we're looking forward to that. And now that you've heard the story of the 425, we're going to show you a little video clip which shows you a bit of the history of of how this here helicopter got to be here in this condition. And now that you've heard the story of the 425, it's time for you to meet her. And I like to call it selfie time. Warrant Officer 2, Second Class, Wobbly 2 Boxcar Bill Jezelik, who is a Vietnam Chinook pilot, awarded the Silver Star, is here to make your personal introduction. You want to say anything or just go take him outside?
You start out regular Army, then.
So what do you think of it?
I love it. I do. Brings back memories.
Does it? Yeah.
Would you mind taking my picture?
Sure. Let me do that for you. Hold on one second here. Let me turn this off.
I only have to finish 2 years. And there was so many of them that we didn't have a place to put them, and they used me to run them around and all. And I finally said they put me back several
And they can't quite find the history of it right now, so.
All that
But they
paperwork's
finally
gotta
got
be in
some,
order.
finally got some rotor blades and engines back in.
Hey, we got the front beach taxi right off limits.
Oh yeah? Well, the back beach is on the other side.
Oh, okay.
All right.
You know what? 147. This man standing before you was known for being able to rig one of these to haul under a Chinook in 3.5 minutes. Sitting in the rice paddy, I can have her ready. Cool.
Now we've got the Hillclimbers right here. Hillclimbers first.
Ain't no telling how many dozens of these I've hauled.
Try to get in there, people here. Hillclimbers.
All the old people over here for there.
Hey, you guys are gonna have to move in.
37.
We have to move in. All have to move in. People on this side turn sideways.
Make your buddy smile. God, you ain't
Going this way.
On the right side, face this way. Okay. Yeah, look at the camera, but yeah, got more hill climbers. Okay, we're gonna have you on the end, and you two are gonna move in. Or get behind each other or
one of
something.
these under a Chinook.
Like this guy, I think he's got the picture. Right there.
Cobra has a tendency to fly on the front.
You need to move in.
You're going to have to move in here with. Okay. Right. You need here.
Hill climber.
That thing I was going to beat us to Al, don't be
Okay, this is for the newspaper, the local town crier.
Back here a little taller behind this gentleman right here. Squeeze in there. Squeeze in. Okay. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Well, now you're hiding the guy behind you there. Yeah.
Okay, we ready? Everybody look at me. Right here. Right here.
So we must only have about.
Hey, look at this one.
How many pachyderms?
Thank you, guys.
Okay, now the pachyderms?
Now the pachyderm.
Don't go away, he'll
Don't go away because we're going to get a group picture.
By the grace of God, survive.
Smile like it's 65 degrees.
Tell everybody.
Bobby.
Everybody. Let me have the crab. Get in there. On the occasion, you're allowed to take a knee. Just for a photo.
Mike's got a forklift to get you back up.
Hey, I seen this guy go down.
There's somebody behind that door there. Come on in the picture. Come on in the picture. I'm not one of them. I'm a boxcar and a Hercules. Pachyderm and Bullfighter. Yeah, I know. All right, 10 hut.
My picture.
Is that it? No. Another one.
My picture.
Okay. 10 hut.
So what do you think of her?
That's good. I tell you, the memory is coming all the time.
I'll bet it does.
And all the really ugly dogs were little chihuahuas with no hair and stuff hanging out. And they'd recoil when somebody wouldn't have pet them, so they didn't make a lot of friends. So when we were up on stage, the crowd was chanting our name. Quantimo. So the judges, they said, we were a bit afraid not to pick her, that the crowd would riot or something. She made a lot of friends, and that's how we did it. She was the most different. There was two of them. Everybody else.
They liked the way I kept my lawn. They said you can go. You're one of the guys who goes, we can leave. Come with me.
When I was retired, I got a call about a week before I retired. The boy went to the